Howdy, brethren. This morning I thought I'd check out the cult of Bryan Denlinger and to see what's going on there on his channel. Yeah, Bryan, he's getting concerned about the way they trim trees these days, fair enough. But this video here, we'll have a look at this.
A little while ago, one of you linked this video here on the screen in the comments, and I checked into it and I thought pretty interesting points made. So we're just going to watch this real quickly, 13 minutes and 15 seconds. This guy, I don't know anything about him, Space Age Farmer channel, don't know a thing, not recommending his channel, but what he says in here is very important because it shows the environmentalist movement agenda and how it ties into the Vatican. Again, remember Revelation 17. The Vatican, their mystery Babylon, is the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Right? If it's an evil system, it will eventually tie back to the Vatican system, mystery Babylon. Right? Not my opinion, not my prejudice, whatever. It's what the King James Bible teaches. So let's watch.
Ladies and gentlemen, the cult of global warming wants a Sabbath. And moreover, they want to force the entire world to worship their creation on the day of their choosing. This is, there's no other way to put it, a truly satanic agenda. And while I won't be getting into my beliefs, and I really am agnostic as to your beliefs, what I want to present to you today is an objective look at what they believe and what they are putting forward. And it's truly remarkable. Calls from the Christian Science Monitor to the Jewish publication Tablet, all echoing this idea that we should really bring back the Sabbath. And you can look at the Green Sabbath Project to get an idea of what that means. Nothing. It means nothing is what everyone must be doing on Sundays. No travel, no shopping, and there's been a dramatic increase in the calls for this since the outset of this pandemic in 2020. Indeed, though, it's been around for some time, and looking back now 11 years at this article from The Guardian called Slow Sunday, the Simple Solution to Global Warming, where they make it quite clear, when they unambiguously state we can and should restore Sunday to a day for Gaia, a day for the earth. Yes, worshipping the creation and not the creator on the day of their choosing. This goes deep, and I'll only be able to scratch the surface today, but I at least wanted to start this conversation because I think it's an important one, particularly given that there are people who believe a global forced Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. There's a lot here to unpack.
Okay, and I just want to say this. It's not the mark of the beast. Okay, that's Seventh-day Adventist teaching. It's false. It is definitely not the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is an implantable microchip in the right hand or in the forehead. You have to get...
Well, it doesn't even have to be implantable. It can be a tattoo that sits in the skin. So it doesn't even have to be a microchip. The new technology they're talking about is actually a tattoo, and it's actually has all the info in there apparently.
You really have to twist what Revelation 13 talks about in order to teach it being Sabbath day, forced Sabbath day stuff. That's nonsense from the Seventh-day Adventist cult. So
yeah, that's right, and it is a cult. Don't let anyone tell you that it's a cult. Now, the reason I'm looking at making a video about Bryan's video is that we're going to look at the Seventh-day Adventists' involvement in our food, what we should eat, how insidious they are. And we know Bryan likes to go on about the Catholic Church, but there is other so-called Christian religions that play a big part in this, and that is the Seventh-day Adventists, as we'll find out a bit later. But it's not just the Catholic Church. You've got a lot of pretending Christians here who are trying to set their agenda. Anyway, I'll keep playing.
Just put that little disclaimer in here, but he makes some good points, so let's continue.
Let's talk about it. I'm Christian, that's my name, and this is the Ice Age Farmer channel. And in my last report, I mentioned that there are calls to extend the lockdown, the response to the pandemic, now ad infinitum, to just keep the world locked down because it's good for the environment. We see that this lockdown, for climate reasons, has already begun. It's already happening. San Francisco Bay officials approved a plan that requires large businesses to have employees work from home 3 days a week. It's a permanent lockdown, a lasting change. And then just yesterday, Boris Johnson emerged and announced that he would be proceeding to rewild 30% of the United Kingdom. And of course, I've covered these calls to walk away from 50% of the UK's farms and just let them turn back into trees to capture carbon. And shut down the sheep farming. You can make more money just by virtue of carbon offsets. You don't need the sheep anymore. The technocrats are imposing their rules on our agriculture and farming, and now Boris is promising to push people off of the land, off of the rural communities, and back into the smart cities.
Well, it's happening here too in Australia. We have, in the state I am, in Queensland, we have farming leases that are like 100-year leases on cattle properties that are now, cattle properties. I know a lady whose family's got a 100-year lease. Her husband, it's been in the family for 100 years. It's coming up for renewal. And what they've been doing when these properties, particularly cattle stations, it seems to be with the 100-year lease, when they come up for renewal, they're not renewing the lease, and they're just turning those properties into national park. And then what happens is you get backloading with weeds and fuel. It's not managed properly, and it becomes a fire hazard, and you get all feral pests in it, and then the taxpayer has to pay for it because you don't have a farmer on there managing the land. And her property's beautiful. I've seen pictures of it. She's got koalas. She manages, traditionally they've been logging it, but logging it sustainably. That word, sustainable. But they've been logging it really well. And I've seen another person's properties. I mean, you always have people that manage their properties badly, but that's all we hear about. But there's plenty of farmers. It's in their best interest, especially cattle graziers and sheep graziers, to manage their land properly. And some methods of managing grazing land has really improved, and I've seen the proof from these people's properties, but that's all going to turn back into national park and be a fire hazard with feral pests, because there's not going to be people on there making a living out of the land and being good custodians of the land. So yeah, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in Australia. They just don't want people to make money off land. They don't want people to earn a living. They don't want people to grow nutritious food off the land.
But where did he get these numbers? 30% by 2030. In fact, he is implementing the agenda that was put forward by the UN and amplified by Pope Francis. Pope Francis said exactly right here, quote, "I'm urging governments to support the United Nations call to safeguard 30% of the Earth as protected habitats by 2030 in order to stem the loss of biodiversity." Of course, this plays into zoonotic threats, and it's because of a loss of biodiversity that we've had the pandemic. They've connected all of these nasty agendas together. But the bottom line here is we're starting to whittle away at human civilization, starting to destroy opportunities for any continued human activity. That is, after all, Agenda 2030 in action, pushing people into the smart cities, shutting down economic activity, taking total control, establishing the climate tracing initiative that Al Gore announced, watching every piece of emissions on the planet. Well, that will certainly be useful now in a climate Sabbath if we want to make sure that everyone stays inside on Sunday. to worship Gaia. Boris Johnson is not the only world leader out there saying that the Pope seems to have a good idea here. Macron eagerly stepped on stage and said that the Pope's got a good idea here. We should shut down human civilization.
And Macron is a trained Jesuit, by the way, so just thought I'd throw that in there.
But there was more that the Pope has said recently, and in fact even 5 years ago in his encyclical, he really broke down the need to shut down economic activity and do away with capitalism. And even he tied it. He mentioned the Sabbath several times. Let's read now from the Pope's more recent comments over this past summer. In his words, the pandemic has shown that the earth can recover, quote, if we allow it to rest. And I'll just point out, Sabbath is Hebrew for rest. And so we'll see the Pope talking about rest a lot. He's actually talking about restoring the Sabbath, but not the real one. He notes that the planet is groaning under the constant demand for economic growth.
Not the real one.
Francis renewed his call for the cancellations of debts of the most vulnerable countries. This is the other part of what is being floated right now, is a forgiveness of debt, a debt jubilee.
Okay, interesting, because I did a study a while back called Why Debtors Will Take the Mark of the Beast. And I said I believe there's going to be a financial incentive. And I didn't even know about a lot of this stuff. So, pretty interesting.
Well, people take the mark of the beast because they like the mark of the beast. They worship the mark of the beast. So they're deceived. They're not being blackmailed into getting the mark. They want to take the mark. And this is why Christians won't take the mark, because why would the Antichrist kill Christians if he could force them to take the mark? And the whole mark of the beast thing, if any man take the mark, it says if any man, that's just the cutoff point. You can do anything, and then you can be a believer, and you're one of God's children. But if you take the mark, that's the cutoff point. So the way it's worded, the way I see it, is just a cutoff point. But there's other clues in there. Christians are getting martyred. If the devil could give a Christian the mark, why wouldn't he do it? He could condemn them to hell. It's because they don't willingly want to. They know when they become a believer, they know that they're not going to worship the devil. Everyone else is going to worship him. He's going to turn on the Vatican. He's going to turn on the religious people. So there's going to be some sort of hate towards the religious people, and the Vatican's going to be, and the Antichrist is going to be worshipped.
For the developing countries. And the concept of debt and debt forgiveness is referenced in Laudato, his encyclical in 2015 as well. Pope Francis affirms that a true ecological debt exists, much like the debt of a sinner. Only this time, whereas God can forgive your sins,
skip through
50 years after their creation, the creation of the cult of global warming, is now announcing it's time for a jubilee.
Okay, let me just show you this real quickly. April 1970, the first Earth Day.
Anyway,
Sunday is the day of worship. There'd be too much resistance
skip
to that.
through a bit.
Even with the Jewish papers, like we said, calling for this as well. So enter Greta. Here's a piece from the Wachusett Democrat last year. Your view, Greta's weekly climate strikes are actually setting a precedent.
Certainly, probably even in the world. Southern Maine is a very big blueberry producing area, and I don't have any first-hand accounts of hearing it in northern Maine with the potatoes, but definitely southern Maine. We were told about that they would literally burn whole fields of ripe blueberries to keep the price up of blueberries.
I'd believe that.
And I've known of this all across the country. They regularly destroy crops to keep the price up. So this whole thing, and he's not, saying it's good that they're, the planet's being over-harvested and whatever. But I'm just saying that these environmental nuts are coming out and saying we can't produce enough food. Oh yes we can. Oh yes we can. They could easily produce enough food. Good healthy food. But they don't want to. The agenda there is to kill a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's the creation of scarcity too. You know, they're obviously like Brian says here, they're destroying crops to keep the price up, and that makes the illusion of scarcity. And this is another thing. I've heard creationists speak about oil, how oil fields just get replenished. It's actually not a fossil fuel. It just comes out of the earth. So that's interesting, but that's another rabbit hole. Yeah, won't go there.
And one of the ways that they do it is through created famine. And that's what's coming. So, very interesting.
In essential ways, Greta is like a modern-day Moses, asking us to slow down our consumption to a sustainable level so that humanity, all of these other debts. Again, that's not going to be your credit card bill. That doesn't get forgiven. We're talking about a way out of the sovereign debt crisis. Much, much deeper. When you read the words of the Catholic Church, talking about why they moved the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, a day of their choosing. Quote, Sunday is our mark of authority. The Church, the Catholic Church, is above the Bible, the Word of God. And this transference of the Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. It is our mark, the mark of the Catholic Church. I want to stop and leave it here, but again, if you're Catholic, I certainly don't mean to offend you, no matter what you are. I have no intention of offending you. I just wanted to draw your attention to this.
Well, why are you talking about Seventh-day Adventist false doctrine? A lot of these truth channels on YouTube, they have a Seventh-day Adventist doctrine and helping hand to them. So many of these so-called truther Christian channels are Seventh-day Adventists when it comes down to it, when you listen to their doctrine. So I'm not saying this guy is Seventh-day Adventist, but he's certainly fallen for some of their propaganda, as so has Brian. You know, everything's about the Catholic Church. Well, the Seventh-day Adventists have a big part in this, as we'll see soon.
Thanks for listening and for considering and for spreading the word if you feel...
I'm also glad that Brian corrects this bloke. You know, he looks at the scripture to say that, you know, Sunday, this is when Christians gathered for worship in the early church.
So inclined, because people need to understand this, or else the reaction without thinking will just be, well, hey, I'm in favor of having a day off, right? Ladies and gentlemen, you can find this report and all my...
Okay, so yeah, I mean, just absolutely incredible what he's showing there. But again, it just confirms what the Bible says. And you know, I will say this, the Catholic Church has changed the term Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, and the Sabbath day in the Bible is definitely Saturday. There's no question about that. But where these guys get messed up is they'll say, well, see, then all Christians should celebrate the Sabbath day. Well, that doesn't work because Romans chapter 13, verse 9, there's not any mention at all of keeping the Sabbath day. Let me show you that real quickly here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go like this.
I'm glad that Brian does this.
Romans
I was a bit worried he wasn't going to correct the guy.
13
correct the guy.
and verse 9. There's no keeping the Sabbath day. Okay? Paul gives the commandments that we're supposed to follow today, and keeping the Sabbath day is not one of them. And if you just want to go to the first day of the week, okay, come down through here, you can see John chapter 20 verse 19, the first day of the week, doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews. Came Jesus and stood in the midst and saith unto them, peace be unto you. Jesus shows up on the first day of the week, not the Sabbath day. He shows up on Sunday. Acts 20 verse 7, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. He didn't come on the Sabbath day, he came on Sunday. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 2, upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. So they're meeting together on Sunday. All right, there's nothing at all wrong with that. Not one thing. Truth is, there's really no commandment when you have to meet together as Christians. The Church of Jesus Christ is supposed to be flexible.
Okay, I'll stop it there. So yeah, Sunday worship is not a Catholic thing. It's what the early church did, and Seventh-day Adventist cult like to say that's the mark of the beast, blah blah blah. Okay, yes, but Brian, the Seventh-day Adventists, there are bigger players than you might think. Okay, let's have a look at some other videos here. This first one here.
Hello, Adapt Live. It's Gary Fetke from Launceston, chatting to you once again. Thanks for the invitation, Eric and team, to come back on the show. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an orthopaedic surgeon based here in Tasmania, Australia. And over the last several years, particularly the last 5 years, I've been trying to clear my name after advocating that my patients, and particularly those in hospital with diabetes, reduce their sugar intake. If that sounds crazy, then we clearly think it has been as well. But in the passage of time, it came to evidence that dietitians from Australia were reporting me to the medical board for giving that advice. And the medical board ultimately succumbed to that complaint, silencing me for giving the advice of reducing sugar and effectively a low-carb, healthy fat lifestyle to my patients. I know that the results are outstanding, particularly in diabetes, and so once you see those results, you cannot unsee them.
Yeah, so this man is an orthopaedic surgeon in Tasmania, and he was cutting off a lot of diabetics' limbs, mainly feet. Well, I think just about all, diabetes sort of does horrible things to your feet and stuff. So he was getting sick of cutting people's feet off, so he gave them dietary advice to reduce their sugar and do a low carbohydrate diet. Eat more meat and just leafy green vegetables, low in carbs and stuff. But then the author, as he says, the Dietitians Association, which is corrupt, and as we'll see later, they're all got being controlled by the people like Seventh-day Adventists. He basically got told not to give dietary advice to his patients anymore. But I'll just skip through this video and we'll play another video from his wife, which is a presentation where she goes into the vested interest behind cereal companies and the Dietitians Association of Australia and elsewhere.
What that meant ultimately was a 5-year battle with the medical board involving 2 Senate inquiries. Ultimately, I was able to get an independent review, which overturned the finding.
I'll just go through this video.
This is a brief summary. We've got a group of billionaires sponsored by billionaire food corporations. Virtually all media outlets were given the documents in the last couple of weeks, and we have done. There's been a health disaster for our community. It's an obesity and diabetes epidemic which is out of control. And we're only seeing the detriment in an economic and now an environmental sense. Continuing down that pathway by adopting what I think is a flawed document without questioning it, just because it comes from massive funding and media hype, is clearly a dangerous situation. What can you do as an individual? Well, it's all about choice. I mean, we can have governments and bureaucracies and associations dictate to us what they think are the best options, but you as an individual can decide what you're going to eat this afternoon. You can make that decision. Even if you're going to eat, you may make a decision to fast. That is effectively your choice, and it's something that you've got an enormous amount of control with. That really leads me into the concept of civil unrest. At present, we've got more and more governments, more and more bureaucracies, more and more institutions that are influenced heavily by
the corporate food industry and the pharmaceutical industry and religious ideology, which are telling us what to do and enforcing that again into those environments that we live. If you in fact adopt a low carb, healthy fat lifestyle, if you go back to eating fresh, local and seasonal food, you are in fact disempowering the corporates and you're empowering the individual. Buying your food locally supports the farmers, it supports the local industries, and that's a major anti-corporate effect. It's also, as you improve your health habit, an anti-pharmaceutical industry effect. But most importantly, it actually empowers yourself as an individual to take back control of your own health and your dietary choices. I honestly think this is what the system's worried about. If we in fact get healthier, if we in fact disempower the corporates, if we take away their funding because of our buying power, then we're having an effect. So we may think we're small, but as individuals, once we start combining this, then we can have an enormous effect as a group. I honestly think that's our future. Civil unrest, if we continue to lay down and just take what's given to us by the food industry and vested interests, then we're going to pay the price for it. Our children are going to pay the price for it. So I'm encouraging you all to think about choice, think about questioning what comes to you, and particularly question the sources of that information. And when it comes to you from the big food industry, and it comes to you from the big pharmaceutical industry, and it comes to you from big public health, and it comes to you from religious ideology, which is where a lot of our work's been done in the last few years, and we see the role of the Adventist Church in making decisions about our dietary guidelines for the United States and the rest of the world, then it's time to start questioning everything along the way.
Yes, so this Adventist church, that him and his wife, I'll play a video of a presentation from his wife next. Well, I won't play the whole thing. But they've investigated the Seventh-day Adventist Church and seen their insidious involvement in the food guidelines worldwide. But the trouble is, people like the Catholic Church, the Seventh-day Adventists, you can't forget about them, Brian. It's a bit of the Hegelian dialectic going on. The Seventh-day Adventists talking about Catholic Church, making truth videos on the Catholic Church, but yet they're up to their own mischief with dietary guidelines that are going to make people sicker and sicker and make corporations richer. So we'll play a video, just a little bit of a video of his wife's presentation.
Thank you everyone, and thank you to Low Carb Down Under for having me here today. My topic is nutrition science. How did we get here? How did we get to a place where those who consider the human evolutionary pathway and basic biochemistry that get...
Obviously, evolution is not science, so it's a shame that most people fall for that, and obviously it's a shame that people think that the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Catholic Church are Christian, because they're not. They're both cults, and big cults with big influences.
Gary described yesterday, where those who understand the health benefits of animal proteins and fats in our diet have become the minority voice of nutrition science. Whereas those who appear to ignore evolution and base nutrition science on the Garden of Eden diet, fruits, grains, nuts and seeds, a place where those who are intent on protecting and actively defending not only processed foods but sugar messaging, they're at the table making decisions about our health and writing the plant-based dietary guidelines. I watched Gary and many other low-carb advocates talk about science till they were blue in the face, talking about the health benefits of low-carbohydrate, healthy fat principles, a fad diet, according to the Dietitians Association of Australia, that lacks scientific evidence. But they love the new science behind breakfast, courtesy of the Australian Breakfast Cereal Manufacturing Forum, made up of 4 breakfast cereal companies: Freedom Foods, Nestle, Kellogg's and Sanitarium. Not only do they have to promote cereal for brekkie, but the DAA corporate partnership actually stipulates that the Dietitians Association of Australia uses its members to influence, protect and actively defend cereal, grains and even sugars messaging. Documents that call out low carb down under because cereal sales are down. Documents that specifically name Gary for active defence, and within weeks, the then CEO of the Dietitians Association of Australia wrote to the hospital where Gary was working and requested pretty much that they silence him. After she wrote a second time, the CEO of the hospital sent out an email saying, "Can we escalate this?" And the rest, as they say, is history. The DAA also happily promote vegan diets, which strictly omit entire food groups and are inadequate without supplementation. Concerningly, they only have 4 referenced papers on their vegetarian position paper, published in 2014 and updated in 2017. How concerning that the DAA gets its dietary advice from breakfast cereal companies owned and founded on Seventh-day Adventist Church ideology. All references are from Seventh-day Adventists and or employees of Sanitarium or Kellogg's, which also happens to be a breakfast cereal company founded by Seventh-day Adventists, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg and his brother.
See, so it's not just the Catholic Church, Brian. Seventh-day Adventists are behind this agenda too. Fake Christians everywhere.
The 4th reference, a supplement in the Medical Journal of Australia, was paid for by Sanitarium and the Adventist Health Ministries. This is concerning, not only for their members who should be able to trust their accrediting and regulatory body to provide them with unbiased scientific research, but as the self-proclaimed peak body for nutrition, the DAA's blatant cherry-picking of data is very concerning for the general public. When Ellen G. White came to Australia in 1890 to set up the church, the Sydney Adventist Hospital and Sanitarium Health and Wellbeing, she wrote that health food business is to supply the people with food which will take the place of flesh meat and also milk and butter. The Seventh-day Adventist Church currently owns 20 processed food industries worldwide, producing in excess of 2,400 breakfast cereals, dairy substitutes, cereal coffees, and a wide range of meat alternatives from nuts, cereals, and soy. Life Health Foods, which is an arm of Sanitarium, reports here in Australia of reaping the benefits of an increasing number of people choosing a plant-based diet. Their anticipated 25% growth for the next financial year is purely driven by a rise in vegetarianism among millennials looking for world solutions.
And even though these couple of videos are a year or so old, this one's less than a year, the other one was over a year, but as we've seen with this pandemic, that meat processors have been hit very hard because, why not? It suits the agenda, doesn't it? So, the Catholic Church is behind a lot of this, yeah, sure, but let's not overlook the Seventh-day Adventists.
In 1863, Ellen G. White was told by God that meat was a toxic substance, as bad if not worse than tobacco or alcohol, a substance that defiled the body and stirred baser passions, leading men, women and children to the heinous act of self-vice. John Harvey Kellogg was just 12 years old when he went to work for the first family of the Adventist Church. He was given the task of typesetting Ellen G. White's book, An Appeal to Mothers, which spoke only of the responsibility of mothers deterring their children from masturbation. Such are just as surely self-murderers as though they pointed a pistol to their own breast and destroyed their life instantly, she said. Is it any wonder that when he became a doctor, John Harvey Kellogg tried everything to prevent intemperance and sinful masturbation? He invented bland breakfast cereals, nut and soy meat analogues, and he prescribed vegan diets. Marketed as health food to curb sexual desires. Before I go any further,
What was
I would
that?
like to say Harvey Kellogg tried everything to prevent intemperance and sinful masturbation.
Brian,
He invented bland breakfast cereals,
maybe you should go
nut
vegan.
and soy meat analogues, and he
help your
prescribed
problems.
vegan diets. Marketed as health food to curb sexual desires.
Yeah.
Before I go any further, I would like to say I'm not anti-religion and nor am I anti-vegan. I'm pro-choice, especially when it comes to health.
Well, the Catholic Church is religion, Seventh-day Adventist is religion, but being a Christian Bible believer is not a religion. It's a belief in the Lord Jesus Christ and the Bible. So it's a belief in truth with a capital T. It's not a religion.
I respect those who choose to be vegetarian or vegan for cultural reasons, health concerns, ethical beliefs, and for their religious ideology. But my concern is that choice is being taken away from you and I by those creating and protecting the rule books. Taken away from people who choose to follow low carbohydrate, healthy fat principles, keto, whatever shape that looks like, but people who include animal proteins and fats in their diet for their health. My personal disclosure is I support Gary, and I have since I was 16 years old. What I love about him is he goes to work every single day with the perspective of a patient, the spirit of an activist, and the heart of a healer. A modern-day Galileo who took on the medical regulators in Australia, and he won.
She's getting quite emotional about her husband. She's a good, loyal wife, obviously. But this is the thing, like, religious nutters are making everyone giving us a bad name, aren't they? With their involvement in this sort of stuff.
Not only is Gary now free to talk about the health benefits of LCHF, but the determination clearly implies that there's no harm going forward for any other health professional in Australia to also recommend LCHF.
Anyway, it's a shame that...
In 2014, when I started my research to clear Gary's name, I have to admit, discovering the influence of religious ideology shaping our dietary guidelines was totally unexpected. In fact, we didn't talk about my research for about 2 years. I simply started out questioning why the highest profile nutritionist in Southeast Asia Pacific region was called in as APRA's expert witness during Gary's 2.5-year Star Chamber investigation to decide if recommending people reduce sugar and processed foods was outside the scope of practice of an orthopaedic surgeon in northern Tasmania with a catchment area of about 120,000 people and 5,000 people following him on social media at that time. Gary's practice, in his practice, he was seeing people with weight-related joint issues, metabolic disease, and the complications of diabetes every single week. I never expected APRA's expert witness to lead me to Sanitarium, a processed breakfast cereal company wholly owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and as such, as Gary mentioned yesterday, they pay no tax.
Fancy that.
Nor did I expect to find Coca-Cola and their deep pockets funding industry-friendly research and initiatives such as exercise as medicine, used to promote physical activity as the solution to obesity and non-communicable disease. I'd never even heard of lifestyle medicine before APRA's expert witness was listed as the patron and speaker for the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, a sister organisation to the global movement based on the temperance health reform message of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Oh, well, there you go. And no doubt that while the Seventh-day Adventists pretend to be against the Catholic Church with all their truthers out there on the internet, they're probably aligned with them. That's how the Hegelian dialect works. But, is it any wonder that the Antichrist is going to turn against the religious people and be his own God? He's going to have a lot of support because religious nutters have a bad name, and it's only going to get worse. Anyway, I just thought I'd make this video just to show that the Seventh-day Adventist is more insidious than you think. Yes, we know about the Catholic Church, but just wanted to make this video and bring attention to this. Cheers and God bless.